Hello, Nye River Middle School students. It's time for another test review for Mr. Dawson and Mr. Wagner. So we have up here on our smart board a map of the U.S. Mr. Wagner, would you split it up into the regions for us real quick?
That's right. This is for our benchmark. So we're going to start with the Northeast, and we're just going to put little compass rose in here, north, south, east, and west. So that's the Northeast up here. We're going to come down, and that's the Southeast. We're going to come across here, and looking at the compass rose between S and W, Southwest, we've got the Pacific. And then that last region, next to last region, is the Rocky Mountains. I'm going to abbreviate that, MTNS. And then right in the middle is the Midwest.
That's probably the biggest one in terms of land mass. Yeah.
What are the states for the Rocky Mountain region?
Yeah, the Rocky Mountains we need to know. So we got Montana up here, guys.
Wasn't there a battle fought there?
Yeah, the battle of the Little Bighorn was there. That's right.
Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, and then where Las Vegas is located in the state of Nevada. So there's a total of what, 6 states there?
Yep, and on your review that we did for Wednesday, and we're going to go over it again Thursday as well, that map that we had you guys do, you need to know the Rocky Mountain states, okay? All right, let's talk about a couple important cities, Mr. Wagner. Where's New York City? Let's start there.
And that's right up here where the immigrants came in. A lot of the immigrants came in with Ellis Island.
Ellis Island.
You had the Steel City here where the Steelers play.
Yep, Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh.
Right there.
So if you see Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania with the steel, there's another city that we learned, it was like the first couple weeks of school, was over here, and that was Chicago.
Yeah. Meatpacking industry, right, guys? Yep.
And then you had Detroit.
And we're a couple other major cities. Let's just say, where's Los Angeles?
Yeah. And Los Angeles over here in California. San Francisco, San Diego. What about in Washington State? Isn't there a city there that's pretty important?
We need to know where Seattle is.
So we're going to put, actually it's up here in the Bay section, so I'll get rid of that. But if you can remember, that's Seattle, and that's in the Pacific region.
That's right.
I think there's 2 T's there with Seattle.
What's maybe an important city in the Rocky Mountain region? Denver. Let's put Denver.
So Denver's in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, Texas is a big state. You think of your sports teams like Dallas, I hate to say the Cowboys, but Dallas Cowboys, and then there's Houston.
Right.
What about New Mexico? You don't hear much about the capital.
What's the capital there? Santa Fe, right?
Santa Fe.
Got to know that one, folks.
What region's Santa Fe in?
Southwest.
Yeah. What region would Seattle be in?
Pacific.
Yeah. What region would Atlanta, Georgia be in?
Southeast.
What about Washington, D.C.?
Southeast. That's where we are, and also Richmond right here.
So I'm gonna, you wanna go from, we've got the regions pretty well covered. Do you wanna move to the Reconstruction period?
Yeah, let's on the map first, or we can erase this or take it down.
Yeah.
Where would barbed wire be used? When did we talk about that?
So you wanna go right on the Great Plains?
You can go there.
So right in here, the Great Plains, we could even include Iowa and Missouri. But when we talk about barbed wire, what was the purpose of barbed wire?
To contain animals. To keep animals either in or outside of your property.
Especially cattle, and that's a big time invention. And then they had something else on the Great Plains, and I'm just gonna quickly erase this middle.
And why else would you use barbed wire on the Great Plains? Because there were no what? No trees, guys.
Trees.
Few trees. You couldn't make a wooden fence.
Now we got a little bit better. So I'm gonna put the barbed wire in here. And that's an invention. So few trees, what would they be making their homes out of?
Sod.
So
sod houses, guys.
The sod homes. And that was available on the Great Plains because there were few trees.
That's
So
right.
the sod homes, and of course, barbed wire.
That's right.
And those are just a couple of the inventions, or one invention, one adaptation on the Great Plains.
Yep. Yeah. Now let's just take a couple states real quick. Minnesota, where is that located? What region is that?
Yeah, now that we don't have the borders back up again, it's right in the middle.
That's our
So
Midwest
Minnesota would be that Midwest region.
region.
So all this,
Yeah. California, that's our Pacific region. Washington, Pacific region.
and I think that's the easiest region because you got those, or region, because you got those just 3 states, they border an ocean. What's that city up in Washington
That one's
again?
Seattle.
And
Seattle.
if we go down to the southwest, we mentioned Houston and Texas. What's that city in New Mexico again?
Santa Fe.
Yeah.
Santa Fe. Okay, let's talk about our Reconstruction amendments real quick. So we're reviewing lots of stuff.
The 13th did away with this terrible practice.
Right. Slavery, abolished slavery. So if you're in my class, remember the SCV acronym.
Yeah.
13th, abolished slavery.
And who was president when that was put through? It was
Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you might, if you see a picture of Lincoln, you're going to know that's the 13th Amendment. The 14th comes along a couple years later.
And this one's important, guys. The 14th gave citizenship to anyone born in the United States, and also it gave,
Equal protection under the law.
that one's important, equal protection under the law.
So you're looking for some keywords here. I got citizenships, but it's citizenship. So make sure you guys know that. And then the 15th.
Yep, remember that equal protection under the 14th, guys. 15th was it that gave black men the right to vote, not women,
Right.
just black men.
So
Okay.
15th, that key word is African Americans, males, the right to vote.
All right.
So slavery, citizenship, right
Yep.
to vote.
Got to know those Reconstruction amendments, folks.
What was one of the good things that came out of Reconstruction, where schooling, help with finding work? What was that organization called? Oftentimes centered around a church or a school.
Yeah,
What was that called?
The Freedmen's Bureau.
The Freedmen's Bureau. So don't
Yeah.
forget that.
That was a thing set up to help former slaves, to help African Americans. Good thing.
The Freedmen's Bureau.
That's right. All right, so we talked about Jim Crow in our class this week. What was kind of the predecessor, the thing that came along before Jim Crow?
And that was black codes.
Yeah.
So that was a terrible set of racist laws, discriminatory laws. So black codes designed to keep African Americans in a state of slavery.
That's right. Yep, keep African Americans, restrict their rights, keep them in a state of slavery. All right, let's go ahead and do another erase, Mr. Wagner.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you want to just add one more thing about
go ahead.
Reconstruction?
Yep.
Who was enforcing all of the amendments during Reconstruction when it was first working?
That'd be your federal soldiers. The whole South was occupied by federal soldiers.
Right.
Yep.
So in 1877, that's when Reconstruction ends. So if you see a question, what happens immediately after Reconstruction ends? Who's leaving? Who was reinforcing?
The federal soldiers
So the
leave.
soldiers leave. They
Yep.
return to their forts and bases and such posts. I'm going to go ahead and erase this.
Now, who was known during the Civil War? Who was the leader of the North, the Union? Who was the president?
The President of the United States
Yep.
was Abraham Lincoln. So
Yep.
Lincoln, who was the 16th president, is going to be the leader through the Civil War.
Right. Now, we had a couple leaders in the South. We had Jefferson Davis. He was the actual president. But who's the most prominent leader that all the citizenship in the South looked up to?
That was Robert E. Lee.
Robert E. Lee. Yep.
And we talked about him in class. So he was a famous general. And after the war, what are they going to do that's really going to try to help heal the wounds? They're going to kind of come together and do what?
They're going to do that fancy word we learned, reconcile. Yep.
So they're going to kind of put aside the past and move forward, put their differences behind them.
Yeah, both of them wanted to get the country back together and move forward. Both of them wanted to reconcile. Reconciliation was very important to both of them.
Then we had another famous great American that we talked about, who also was a leader during this time. I'm going to give him a beard as well. Sometimes he was clean shaven. Give him the bow tie. And this man was a famous speaker, huge civil rights leader,
Yep.
and a former slave, so we could really, talk about the injustices of slavery. And he was also famous for something else, really a big proponent of this, really trying to push this forward. And
Voting rights.
Yeah.
Voting
So
rights.
really big with voting rights.
And this person is Frederick Douglass.
So we got Lincoln and Lee reconciling voting rights. We have Mr. Douglass.
A great orator, a great public speaker. I kind of use the example of President Obama was a good public speaker. So Frederick Douglass was very much like this person.
And leading into that, we talked today in class just a little bit about two future civil rights movements. We're going to kind of carry on that leadership when Frederick Douglass passes away.
Yep.
And that's going to be Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois.
That's right.
And they had different paths of how to go about bringing about equality. Du Bois wanted that instant full rights, and then Booker T. Washington had a different idea about how to go about bring about equality, and it was about schooling, I think, with the
Yep.
Tuskegee Institute.
To learn a trade, to learn a skill.
And that term, like learning a skill, we have that center here in Spotsylvania, but learn a vocational, go down that route, which is again a trade, a skill. So that was Booker T. Washington.
Yeah, we might want to draw that out on the board real quick. Let's do a Washington and a
Yeah.
Du
Compare and
Bois.
contrast.
Yeah. Let's turn this off, Mr. Wagner. So we're talking about Booker T. Washington first. He was one of the major leaders at the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, which was a vocational school, vocational education for African Americans, where they learned a skill or a trade.
And that was the Tuskegee
Institute.
Institute.
Yep. And he kind of believed in a gradual progression toward equality, right?
Learn the trade. He hated all the injustices with segregation, but he thought the best path was to go ahead, learn a trade, and go ahead and kind of rise up from that
Right.
trade and that position. And W.E.B. Du Bois had a totally different mindset, and he had the goatee. W.E.B. Du Bois, and he was for full rights right now.
Immediately.
Immediate.
Yeah.
Full rights now. So he didn't see this path. He didn't want to follow the path of patience. He wanted immediate equality.
Yeah. Sometimes Booker T. Washington was even criticized for being too slow and
Right.
willing to accept too many bad things, but nevertheless, he's extremely important, did a lot of great things for African Americans, and was one of our earliest civil rights leaders. He was actually born a slave. So
both of these men, civil rights leaders, Tuskegee Institute, Harvard University,
yeah.
Great leaders, and some very, very intelligent men.
Yeah. All right, students, watch this video as many times as you need to, right, Mr. Wagner?
Yeah, I think that winds it up. The amendments, remember Reconstruction, look at the regions, that's real important. And remember, the whole purpose of a benchmark, or we call it a DFA, is to see where we're at and see what you know. So do your best.
Absolutely. Thank you, students.
Thank
See you
you.
soon.